Believe in that.
Awesome. Evening, guys. How's it going?
What's up?
We're here for another weekly lockdown live chat. As usual, I'm joined with my awesome co-host, Mr. Dracona Media, Alec. How's it going?
Sup. I'm good.
Nice. Representing. I got the gear also because today we're joined with two members of two bands. So we got a little bit of a split interview going here. We got Dominic and we got Darius of Bleeding Spawn and Displeased Disfigurement. Greetings, guys. How's it going?
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess let's actually get into the meat and potatoes because you guys are our first brutal slamming death metal group to actually join. So you guys are, as well as being band members, you guys are actually avid fans of the genre. So why don't you give give us a little bit of a rundown of what it actually takes to be brutal death in this day and age? What is the sound?
Right, you're gonna have to be yourself, man. Like we're not fake, you know.
It's about fun.
Yeah, everything's about being extremely brutal, and all the subcultures are brutal. That's who we are, but still having a good time in the meantime as well. Not taking life too serious.
No, not too serious.
Not quirkies. It's extreme dedication as well, man. Like a lot of people fall away from the genre. What do you think?
Yeah.
Like, especially in South Africa, we check people like they into brutal death and they find other stuff that influence on them, and then they go into like more melodic. But we would just stick to brutal, man. Like we dig the subgenre.
Detuned guitars, fucking low, 6 strings.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, why don't we get into a little bit of a history? Let's. Well, I'm curious. Your guys like musical upbringing. What were the bands that kind of got you into it? Because, like you guys said, it's kind of it's a very big genre in the global metal scheme, but it's also very underground still and taboo here in SA. So, what were the bands that kind of got you into it, and got you deciding into let's go full tilt?
Well, take it back to the beginning. Napalm Death, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, your 90s mainstream death metal bands. That was the start. And then we discovered a little band like Broken Hope. And they were like the fucking heaviest band on the fucking planet. And yeah, that's how brutal death metal started.
Yeah.
Before us.
Definitely.
I was like a dick and a condom. And I learned, how to come there afterwards.
Once I gave him Broken Hope, it was over. Then I broke his virginity. Yeah. It was over.
I've got 2 assholes and 1 small ball. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But that's brutal death metal. It's cool.
Yeah, man. You come in raw. That's how it goes,
It's not like,
for good or bad. For good or bad.
Yeah.
Cool. I got a question for Dom. So with Displeased Disfigurement, there's like a long history of you doing like all the vocals for that band, right? With a little bit of Darius adding some shrieks and whatnot. What made you guys what made you guys change to get like a dedicated front man, and what has Theo brought to Displeased?
But what I wanted back then, I was like, I wanted to do one thing straight, so I was like a bassist and a vocalist at the same time. So then me and Doris thought, let's just get a frontman to represent the band a little bit better, to give us a bit of a better identification at the end. So we pulled Theo in, obviously, as a gore-grind vocalist from Resurrection of Lethal Remains, because
another Middleburg band.
Yeah, he comes from Middleburg, and we needed someone that's got the same roots as what we do. Someone that loves death metal as much as we do, but also someone that's willing to learn through time. So that's why we got him, and he's brought a very cool style, live and in the studio, because he's recorded a split with us as well. And live, he has a cool energy, man. And something that I prefer looking at live is the guy that actually fronts the band. I couldn't do it, I play bass, you know, so it's cool to have a frontman doing that for you. And having him under my wing is pretty cool, man. I dig it.
Sick.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we were talking about releases. Obviously, Bleeding Spawn just put out the Pariah Attestant EP, which is blasting as hell, but it does bring in a little bit of a new element, like a heightened level of intensity. Obviously, the main thing you notice is the new, I don't know, 350 BPM triggered drums now. It's a little
3.5.
Epic. Well, I'm kind of like Darius. Maybe you can actually answer this from a production point of view compared to the first album, which obviously was a little bit more of a sophomore, figuring yourselves out. How was the production, and how was everything working towards this EP compared to that previous?
Well, production was it's one step up. We worked with Thomas Hugh on the sophomore album, and we needed someone on this album, on the EP, that understood death metal and detuned guitars and blast beats, how to mix and master them more properly. And Thomas Hugh, he did well on the sophomore album, but for us, we needed someone that can work with H strings.
More load.
Yeah, more low end, who knows how to mix H string guitars. So we went for Louis N from
Mega Dolor. Burning Tones.
Yes, Burning Tones Studio. Yeah, so we listened to most of Megadolon's production, and we were like, those guys now, they understand H string guitars, and we just thought, that's the pal to go. That's the standard.
Well, you did bring up a thing that's a good segue into my next question with 8-string guitars. I've noticed when you guys jam live, Darius, you play an 8-string while Vota plays a 6. I was wondering if you could tell us about that sort of dynamics and like the tunings and whatnot.
Well, the tunings are still the same.
Exactly the same.
It's exactly the same tuning on the 8 or the 6 string.
Same string gauge.
Same string gauge as well. So we have that locked in. Vota is just like, he's more of a 6-string slinger than an 8-string, you know, like me.
Still back in the hood,
yeah.
but
but we've convinced him now to go with the 7-string. He bought himself a 7-string, so we're just waiting for the next live show, and then Vota will be on stage with the 7-string.
But the 6-string to the 8-string did bring
works well together.
Brought a bit of clarity into like the live performance, you know. It's easier for most African technicians to like mix out a 6-string guitar than the 8-string. So having that on stage was a bit easier to get the clarity out. But we're all into the low strings. So obviously the main guitar in the mix, you know, is obviously Darius's. He's his front runner.
Yeah, I do the low ends and Vota the high end. So
a lot of people would be like, okay, it has got a cool blend to it, and they can't really tell the difference. But for a person like you, Alec, you exactly know, okay, this is what they used to sound like, and this is what they sound like now. And I think if you've been to any of our recent shows, you could hear a bit more clarity, especially because we're a bit faster than, you know, the average band. Clarity is needed, you know?
Yeah. 100%.
That was
epic. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess we can kind of look a little bit at lyricism, because you guys actually did mention a couple of bands like Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, and then you could probably include the likes of Suffocation as well, in terms of like the pioneers of what brought on this genesis. But in terms of lyricism, there's a lot of violence, a lot of horror elements. So I'm kind of curious from both of you, a lot of that. But I'm curious, the slasher horror vibe of the 80s, that's a lot of the elements that I get through it. Were you guys horror fans growing up? Tom, yourself.
Heavily 80s influence from back to front. It's 80s all day, every day in my life.
Yeah, we're very horror influenced.
Yes.
We've been this way since we can remember, man. You did mention to me yesterday that You watched the movie The Blob that scared you.
The Blob is the shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
We
yeah.
ate stuff up like jelly back
Yeah.
then, you know, it's like, yeah, feed us more. Yeah, no, we're very influenced by 80s horror. I mean, it's pioneers of, you know, that genre. You know, they came up with brilliant ideas. So taking that into like your new millennium, it's kind of using a new initiative, you know, to keep something that's so popular, but yet make it still relevant. Yeah. And the 80s still live strong with us. Well, he's
In my heart,
he's more
I'm
the
80s.
fan. He's and up, so I at least fit into
Yeah, I'm an 80s kid, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that kind of works with what I want to actually discuss, because like you guys said, like the slasher horror vibe, I mean, that's a lot of the theme and the ideas that come into the brutal death lyricism. It's that graphic idea of you can't believe it's real and it's actually happening, and it forces your brain to think and conjure up these images. But also, but I think this kind of works pretty well with the question that I have for you, Dom, because similar to Duncan of Volvadinia, you do a lot of the artwork and a lot of the merch designs for both of the bands, which obviously, you know, that's again taking a bit of your ideas and your the mentality and kind of putting that onto paper and what.
Actually, Lyle, to tell you the truth, it's both of us, man. I just run most of the Photoshop. Like,
He knows how to do all the programs and all this shit.
you forget that in the 80s, Photoshop didn't exist.
Exist.
But no, I do a lot of the Photoshop, so I know how to do the artistic creations of it. But when it comes to the artistic side, we both sit down and be like, okay, this is what we want, you know. So we'll bring in like, you know, cauliflower and broccoli, and both of them work in a chicken pie, you know.
Yeah.
That's what we basically go for. We work as a team, and nothing gets run solo by us. So if I come up with an idea and I go behind his back and be like, I'm going to do this without you. There's none of that, man.
Yeah.
Like, we're very excited to always bring our ideas together.
Yeah, to
you
the
know?
table.
So a lot of the artwork that you guys are seeing, actually all the artwork is a collaboration between what we've basically
Ideas,
thought of. Yeah. A lot of it comes from him, you know, and he's like, okay, this is what I got. What can we do with it? And then we take it to the next further. And then we're like, okay, let's put some veins into this muscle. And then basically that's how it gets formed. So that's how we get our inspiration. We sit together, we watch the same shit, we listen to the same shit.
Yeah, we do everything together.
We just don't do that together.
We even fuck together, but separately goals, you know.
That's right.
Or is it?
Anyway, let's keep talking a little bit about merch, because again, there's another thing obviously that goes with that. You guys are probably one of the most proactive bands, probably in the Southern Hemisphere, regarding South Africa, regarding merch. You have had a lot of different lines and tons of different designs, especially during this lockdown period. How much of a necessity was it getting merchandise and having stuff and for fans to actually support the band with, especially now that you can't perform and, you know, there's only so many albums to go around. I mean, merchandise seems to be a logical fit, but not a lot of bands go ahead with it.
But you're going to have merch, man.
Yeah,
Like, it's a must.
very important.
You know, you cannot have bread without the butter unless you like dry bread. Merch is our butter, man. It's the thing that goes with everything. It is the biggest income for the band. You know, like the live tours or the live shows that we play, albums, band camps, Spotify, all that stuff will not cover half the amount
of what merch does.
So merch it's important, you know. At this point, there's not one tune being played, but we're all wearing merch. So that's how important merch is, you know. It's very fundamental for everybody to wear clothes. And I guess if we were like in a naked tradition, we'd still like at least get our logo there somewhere.
I'll
Snap our logo on your left thigh. But yeah, no, merch is extremely important. Since we lockdown, it was a bit difficult, but everything was basically extremely difficult to get.
Restricted, yeah.
You couldn't get hold of, you know, the manufacturer's printer stuff. If you did, you had to wait an extremely long time to get it. that was a big issue for lockdown. So we basically used everything that we had prior to lockdown, and we're like, okay, who can we use that's proactive in the scene right now, that's willing to print for us? And we just use that.
Sick. Now, you guys are, both your bands, as far as I understand, are signed to CDN. I'd love to know how that sort of came about, like who contacted who, and also maybe talk about how it's like benefited you guys.
Yeah, well, we started off producing our Bleeding Spawn album independently, and then Brutal Minds picked us up.
States from the States.
Yeah, from the USA, and they, what,
50.
Yeah, 50 CDs. They released 50 CDs through Brutal Mind, and in CDN were busy with talks with Volvadinia. They were trying to sign Volvadinia. And then at the time, Volvadinia signed with Lacrimated Records. And then Greg from CDN Records decided, well, if you can't get Volvadinia, then he approached us and he was like, fuck, he wants a South African band. He was going to sign Volvadinia, but they signed to another label. Then he approached us with a contract, 500 CD release, our debut album. And we just said, fuck yeah, let's do this. Yeah,
and it has benefits to us.
Yeah, it's benefits. Yeah, it's a 25-year record label. They've been around for fucking ages. So, and there's big bands that's been on that lineup through the years. So it's pretty. And
we love being on CDN.
Yeah, and we work for CDN Records. We're representatives of them. They pay us to promote their products every day. So every day on Facebook, you'll see us just promoting CDN Records. Any band, anything that's got to do with CDN Records, we promote. We the branch of CDN Records.
Yeah, we're the South African branch.
Yeah, the South African branch.
So if you see too much spam from us about CDN, just hot.
Yeah, we get paid.
Give one of those.
Give it the likes.
I like those on the cave ones. It's like, oh, okay for you. I think you post.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, while we're talking about like the Holy Trinity being Bleeding Spawn, Displeased, and Volvadinia, pretty much the flag bearers, we'll include Resurrection of Fetal Remains in there as well, because we got it. But there's quite a discernible difference between both the styles of the bands. Yeah, audibly, to the average person, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But I mean, Displeased is definitely more a death grind, whereas Bleeding Spawn is more traditional, brutal death with some hooks and almost I want to say crowd friendly, if that makes you know what I mean. But tell me, when it comes to writing, exactly. Well, I was wondering, I mean, is there a different headspace that you guys are in when it comes to writing material for either one, or is it more like have a jam and you're like, okay, this has to go to Displeased, this is Bleeding Spawn, or is it,
No. When we write Displeased, we got two different tunings. With Displeased, we tune down one finger to G, and in Bleeding Spawn, we play power chord in A. So when I write in power chord, I write Bleeding Spawn. And when I put in drop D for Displeased, I only focus on writing Displeased. I can't mix the two. I get confused. They have to be separate.
Yeah, you're gonna have to drop the G string before
you
get
the
to
G string, bro.
The ass sometimes is Displeased, and sometimes the ass is Bleeding Spawn.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out,
it's a mood, it's a vibe. Yeah. When I write for Displeased, I tap into Displeased and only Displeased. And when I write for Bleeding, I focus only on playing what sounds like Bleeding Spawn. Basically, yeah.
Sick. You guys brought out Flesh God Apocalypse the first time that they came here. I was wondering if you could share how that worked in terms of fundraising and whatnot. And do you think it's a viable model for bands to go with going forward, like playing fundraising shows? And the reason I ask this is obviously we don't really have like Witch Doctor's not doing shit anymore. You know, we don't really have the capacity to bring out brutal bands because that won't appeal to the masses.
Yeah. Well, you can take this one.
Well, with Fresh God, it was actually Vulgar Entertainment that brought them.
Val, yeah.
Yeah, Val and Gareth.
Barloman,
Yeah.
it's management.
They were like managed, yeah. Vulgar managed Barloman back then, and they brought Fresh God over. They got into contact with EMG. And they held a couple of fundraiser gigs, but that didn't nearly cover the cost of bringing them over.
Yeah.
Like, it was a professional tour. You know, everything was like a professional card. Everything was done right. The trailer, the big bus, the accommodations, you know, the right place to play.
Yeah, it was
The
done on
food.
an international level.
And when you're working with that, especially on a 7-day, no fundraiser show in this country is going to bring you the amount of money to actually make ends
Yeah, we
meet.
played 1 or 2 or 3 fundraiser events,
Yes.
but that didn't cover.
Yeah, like that only covered like maybe a 15 to 20% of the whole tour. So obviously, them going back to where they come from, Italy, obviously Vulgar Entertainment sat with a big loss. You know, they didn't benefit or profit out of it, but they were able to pay the band. They were able to pay a fresh.
Pay the tour bus, pay the sound guy, the back line. Everybody got paid except us.
Yeah, but we don't mind.
But we
that.
don't mind.
It was all cool.
It was all good, yeah.
It's a risk that you're gonna have to take if you're gonna bring on any band. If you haven't got like a big market behind
Following,
it. You know, if you're not like Ram, that's got a lot of flow behind them, a lot of income. You know, if you're gonna do it independently, you must kind of see the big picture that you might lose money. So we knew that Vulgar Entertainment are going to lose out of that, and then they did, and they went quiet. Obviously, it hit their band quite hard, but we thanked them for what they did back then, because they actually brought us to a level that we actually can be very proud to say that we are where we are because of them.
Yeah, it's because of that we are where we are today.
Yeah, like that tour showed us everything that we needed to know, what we know right now.
And Fresh God told us and gave us tips, and we were like, just like basically just learning from this band every day, asking them questions. How do you run a band? And they were just like telling us for hours and hours on the tour bus. We would just talk to them and ask questions, and they would just give us the information, and we just took all that information and went to the next level.
Merch, don't do drugs, and don't fuck groupies.
Don't fuck groupies. Don't do drugs.
But yeah, anybody's gonna do it independently. We've even discussed it, like in our previous times of doing Rocktober. We knew if we're gonna do it, we're gonna need to at least have 1,000% flow in our bank account before we can even see profit. And today's time, you don't really want to sit wrong in apps or FMB because they're gonna fuck you over.
Yeah. South African banking systems. Anyway, well, I mean, obviously that kind of,
it's like,
you know, like all of this event coordination, I guess, kind of got you a little bit in tune with kind of hosting your own event. I mean, you guys did your first own Spawn Fest last year. Good reaction, huge stacked lineup, probably the most chunkiest lineup of brutal talent across South Africa. Obviously, lockdown hit. I was curious, would you guys have hosted another event this year? And if so, were you scouting talent already?
Yeah, we got, well, submissions was open by March this year.
Yeah, February, March.
February, we opened submissions, So basically, how that started is I came with the idea that I see a lot of fests in South Africa, but it's not fucking brutal and heavy. It's a variety of bands. And then I came up with the idea, and I told Dominic, let's host a South African Death Fest, because Death Fest is like global. There's Death Fests in every country, you know, and so Death Fest is a huge, you know, trademark in the world. So I was like, South Africa doesn't have a Death Fest where we got extreme bands on, from black to thrash to death, and whatever extreme band, we put them on. And then our 10-year anniversary came up, and then I told Dominic, instead of us doing Death Fest, let's do Spawn Fest. And he's like, yeah, fuck, it's a good idea. And he took over open submissions, and then he ran most of the bands and the advertising. And then we called in Vits Boertes from Instrumental, stays in Cape Town. He did all our lyrical videos for us and the Spectral Realms lyrical videos.
He did all the videos for Spawn.
Yes.
Every single thing that you saw there video-wise
Was from him, yeah.
He did everything, yeah.
And then from there on, we just wanted to get the most fucking biggest lineup we could fucking get and just put it out there.
I suck as a stage manager though, because I want to see people's slots end, you know, professionally.
Yeah.
Like you play. I don't care if we end at 6 o'clock tomorrow. So it just was like that. But yeah, that was a fun show, man. We definitely would have held it again this year if lockdown didn't hit. It would have happened already.
Yeah.
But we'll move it till next year. Yeah, definitely. We're not gonna like hold back on it. It's no use doing it now because we want to push for a little bit of a bigger venue. If you can get it, if you can't, at least push for at least a 3-day thing, you know, to get it.
Yeah, we want to do it a 3-day fest this time. Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday.
We come from Rocktoberfest. That's basically where we learned a lot of the stuff that we do today regarding live shows. Alex should know Rocktober.
Yeah, from 2011, 2010, 2011, and
2010, our previous drummer from Displeased, he hosted it, and then we just took over after that.
Yes.
So
we used to run in big 3-day festivals, and we learned a lot from that, doing this Mpumalanga Rocktober festival.
We would have actually kept on with that as well, but the municipality took those grounds over.
Yeah.
And those grounds are perfect, man. There's like a big field. If anybody was there, they'll remember exactly how that place looked.
A small little town, 40 k's outside of Middelburg, called Hendrina. Like a little bargain town, you know? Yeah.
I was actually going to ask if you would consider doing something your guys' side, because it seems like an untapped opportunity, especially if you're going to do like a 3-day fest. It'd be really cool to have people to travel.
A lot of the city people love like traveling up in our way, you know, into like the meaty land and the
meaty part of the country.
The city people loved it, but the venues here, there's nothing.
There's venues,
absolutely nothing. We can't even play as a local band.
Yeah.
If people want to watch us, come to my garage, you know. We're next to a cemetery, so that's cool.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's no venues for us to host anything.
No plus.
Say again?
No plus.
Well, there is.
There is plus.
But there's like crocodiles and hippos. They're going to eat people.
The fans are going to disappear.
Yeah. I like death metal, but I don't want to see my death metal fans die.
Yeah.
Not on mine. Maybe somewhere else. Not on a sports fest.
No. or Oktoberfest.
Yeah. But if anything opens, we'll definitely keep it in consideration. We've looked throughout the years to find place, but there's a couple of things that you have to take in mind. You know, you have to get scaffolding, you have to get professional sound, and you have to get musical licenses, you have to get bar licenses. It's way harder now to get a bigger venue than what it is back then. And back then, it just flowed easy with us.
Yeah, it just came together.
Yeah, it was sad for us to lose that venue because you know, Alec, you saw that place. It was a damn awesome place.
Fun venue.
So yeah, that was a sad part of our history, you know, losing that venue. But if we ever do find anything in the Mpumalanga area, you can guarantee yourself there, man.
Sick. Over to you, Lyle.
Yeah. I'm thinking we need a nice broad question to kind of tie this conversation up like a sausage. So yeah, like so basically where we were talking about earlier, it's still a very taboo subgenre here and the micro subgenres within brutal death. But overseas, it's as unified a family feel as you could get. You've got Obscene Extreme, you've got all the death fests across the world, and you've got bands almost in every country blocking out brutal, guttural, low-end lyrics and bringing about that almost old-school grindcore element to the genre. So the point I'm just saying, it's very much a family vibe there. But whereas here in SA, a little bit more smaller. What are your guys' thoughts of the future with brutal death? A little bit smaller. A little smaller. But I mean, obviously, as you guys are kind of spearheading it, like the whole movement, and then you've got Vulvadinia kind of setting this international precedent on the tourings and whatnot. What are your thoughts? What do you expect from the genre coming out of SA in the future?
But I think in our time of playing live, we've seen a very big development within every genre of music. I think currently there's a lot of people that like brutal death metal. There's a lot of people that listen to slam and the more guttural stuff. But I think a lot of people have stopped playing music. No one's really following that passion, that idea of having their own identity to play it. So then they more fall onto the thing that's a bit more commercial, you know, something that they can easily digest. So our brutal death community is way smaller than what it was actually. It used to be a bit more packed, especially in the Durban area.
Yeah, there were a lot of death metal bands before 2012, and then after 2012, a lot of death metal bands just started splitting up and going on a hiatus. So at the current 2020, there's not a lot of death metal bands in South Africa or extreme bands. You know, it's a dying breed, yeah, all of a sudden. Back in 2008, 2005, and in the 90s, death metal was like, there was a mass plenty of death metal bands, and people were like, there's too many death metal bands, they want variety. And now through the years, death metal, it's like city people, I don't know, they don't want to play extreme music. They'd rather go and play more melodic music or core, or, you know, where in the city, there's no death metal bands. It's like you can name
very little,
yeah. There's Fallen Prophets in Cape Town, and Johannesburg. There's like nothing. There's no extreme bands, you know.
Especially now the newer ones that we're basically referring to. There's a handful of them.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't say it's sad. It's just that we were going to continue pushing this music down people's throats. Yeah, and we've gotten it this far.
We're not going to give up.
We've gotten it this far to be actually liked for what we do.
Yeah.
When we started out, we were shit scared of going live, thinking, what the fuck?
Yeah, we were classy uppies thinking that the city boys are going to fucking hate this music.
We used to go to Woodstock and talk about like really like underground bands like Romp and Prom.
Yeah.
Like brutal anal kind.
And then people would be like, what
and
the
everybody's
fuck?
like, what the fuck is that? And there was one band that stood up back then, was DN Crescent. Everybody should know them.
Yeah.
Their drummer was Nikolai Bruni, and they had a fucking cool set live. And what a brutal band, man. And we used to click all of these guys, and we're like, okay, this is what we want to do. But comparing back then to now, nothing's really changed because there's only this little bit. There's only a handful of brutal death metal bands. Now let's shoot it down to like Indonesia, where you're not in a brutal death metal band. That's
500,
you know?
yeah.
Well, you can't not play in a brutal death metal band. That's Indonesia for you. You know, back here in the South, it's like, brutal death.
Yeah, we had to prove ourselves when we started out. Everybody was like, death metal, put them last. They're heavy. So for like 5, 6, 7 years, we would play the 12:30, 1 o'clock slots, where most people have gone home, but we paid our dues, and I think we've opened up, paved the way for bands like Vulvadinia to be like more like, hey, that's acceptable, extreme music, it's, you know.
Yeah.
So we were treated a lot like, you're a death metal band, you know, put them last, get all the groovy bands and the rock bands and the core bands and the core bands out there, the more core bands, and put the death metal last, you know.
Now we've played many shows where we get to the club and we wait and we wait.
And we see the people get less and less
and then
and
we
less.
don't play because like, okay, there's no time anymore.
Yeah, we played our fests where we drive all the way and then we get there and then Chromium plays an hour slot and then they send us home. And they're like, sorry boys, there's no more time. So, but we've been proving ourselves through the years that we're not going to stop what we do, even if a venue people who book the venues, those people don't listen to brutal death metal. So they're not going to put a brutal death metal band on their lineup. They rather get all their chummies, and we're not part of the clique. We're one side. We're Mpumalanga, you know. We're not part of the Johannesburg or Cape Town musicians, you know. It's just us here, you know. So it's hard when we're not part of the clique in the cities and everybody's friends and everybody knows each other. So it's harder to get your band on a lineup because these people don't know you personally, they're not friends with you. So then they're like, Bleeding Spawn, who the fuck's this? Okay, put them last, you know. They're too fucking heavy. But we don't care what's if it's the first slot or the last slot, we'll go fucking hard. You know, we'll prove it. Yeah,
we've definitely paid our dues. You know, we don't get these slots anymore, and a lot of organizers have also seen it. Like we're still around. It's 11 years and we're still playing live. We're not going to stop. You can give us R1 or you can give us 10,000 rand. We'll still play for that R1 or we'll play an equivalent show for that R1. And we hope that people that don't listen to our genre of music can also learn from that.
Yeah.
That these guys are playing the most intense music that you can possibly get, and yet they're still doing it for next to nothing. So does that mean that's passion, or does that mean that's a hobby? Because that's a very good question for anybody that's getting into the genre. When you start really tapping into brutal death metal, understand that this is a livelihood. You know, like you can get into a very small community, which is your family at the end of the day. And be it that, I'd rather keep it small because I don't want too much politics in our death metal scene. I'd rather keep that out. So let it be small, because then it's gold. And I'm not going to let our gold be taken away by strangers, man. So that's how I see it. I see it as a big, passionate scene for death metal, and it's almost sacred for me. You know?
Sick, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. It's been really cool. It's been really great to get your insights and views. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much for joining us, guys. We'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll have you guys back. We're going to be joined soon with Theo also, so we're going to talk a little Resurrection. And yeah, catch up same time next week. And yeah, have a safe week ahead, guys. Take it easy.
Same, guys. Keep it metal. Cheers.